Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and today I'm here with a Foxhole 4, which is Tom Shea, Tommy Burns, Matt Balthazar, and Meredith Bennett. We all know Tom and Tommy as the co-editors of A to Z and frequent guests on the podcast. Matt is from Austin, and we have Meredith from New York City, and they all climb Mount Whitney together. But in this episode, we're not only going to talk about their Whitney Summit, we're going to talk about their backgrounds and how they met and how they decided to do this summit together at the convention. So welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. And since we all know Tom and Tommy, we're going to start with Matt and Meredith, get into their backgrounds just a little bit. So Meredith, in New York City, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having us, Lauren. I think my highpointing history, or my history in the outdoors, is relatively new. I didn't really grow up kind of doing big hikes or big outdoor adventures. You know, I was certainly adventurous as a kid. But really, I didn't get started hiking until I was in probably my late 20s, early 30s, kind of later in life. And that was just a way to kind of explore the world. I read about places like Patagonia, for example, and the best way to explore that part of the world is to hike through it. So that's how I really got started in hiking, and kind of as I was training for these different trips. I would hear about different lists. For example, where I'm from, I'm very close to the Catskill Mountains, and there's, a challenge where you can climb all of the Catskill high peaks and you get a patch. So that really kind of finishing a list and ticking things off, that really appealed to me. So I started doing that project, and I finished that, which was, kind of took me a few years. And the way I got into highpointing was actually a little bit by accident. It was something I kind of stumbled across. I actually read an article about the Bargo brothers, which are from Austin. I live in New York City now, but I'm originally from Austin. It kind of struck me, I didn't really think about, highpointing in states, because some states are flat, obviously, and don't have mountains. But again, kind of the list aspect really, that appealed to me. So I started that project during the pandemic as a way to kind of get outside, get out of my apartment. I did the Northeast pretty quickly, and the rest is history. Here I am.
Oh, that's great. I love hearing all of the common denominators that we all have. One of them is definitely lists. So love hearing that. So Matt, how about you? How'd you get started in the outdoors, and how'd you get into highpointing?
Yeah, getting started in the outdoors. It was one of those things where I really enjoyed backpacking, especially as I got older. And it was kind of one of those only times where you can get out, the noise of the world starts to decrease, and you can just kind of connect with your thoughts and with nature. And so I started out backpacking, spending time out in the backcountry, taking long weekends here and there, doing it with friends. My dad and I tried to go once a year, and so that's how it started in the outdoors. And then in highpointing, it was one of those where my very first boss, I was probably 22 years old. She mentioned that her husband was wanting to go to the highest point of every state, and he was doing it with their two sons. And this was Kit Spels, who's married to Alan Spels, who in A to Z magazine, probably 2 magazines ago, did a nice story about their experience. And so I had heard Alan talking about this with their boys, and I thought, how cool is that to do that as a family, to do that as with your sons, to be able to go out and check off this list and make those memories together. And so I always had it in the back of my mind of, I want to go to the highest point in every state. I want to have that on my bucket list. And then it just kind of sat there for a long time. And then a friend challenged me to come up with, what are your New Year's resolutions? And I was like, I don't do resolutions. I just kind of take life as it comes. And he's like, no, like choose one thing that you want to do this year. And I said, okay, I'm going to write down my bucket list. That's going to be my New Year's resolution. I'm going to spend this year, write down my bucket list. And so what started as a list of 10 things has grown to 72 things. And one of those things on that list is, go to the highest point in every state. And so I realized that if I'm going to do that, and it's one of those that once you make the list, you got to do it. So you can't put it on the bucket list and say, we'll see if we get to it. It's once it's on there, it's going to happen. And so I realized that that's going to take some time, and I better get started. And so started probably 3 or 4 years ago. Started with Texas here in my home state, and have expanded out from there.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned that you like to backpack in the wilderness. What wilderness? What area?
Really enjoy the western side over in Utah, Canyonlands around Moab. A lot of just incredible places there. Colorado, a lot of great trails. Lost Creek Wilderness is kind of one of the hidden gems there that I've enjoyed. And then parts along the Appalachian Trail. So that's also on the bucket list, is hikes the entire Appalachian Trail. Right now in life, it's going to be a section hike for me instead of a through hike. And so taking various points and doing 40, 50 miles at a time over the course of long weekends.
Yeah.
Lauren, I think you could do an entire podcast on Matt's bucket list.
Yes.
Because his bucket list is pretty epic. If you dive in and look at some of the things that he's both got on the list and has already done, it's pretty amazing. I remember that was a big part of our discussion as we were going up Whitney, was kind of ticking off things that Matt had done on his bucket list.
That's cool.
Yeah, when you have 18 hours, you get to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think we were looking to name it different than the bucket list. We wanted to come up with our own name. Remember, I don't know if we did that yet, but I'm involved in a few of those. I got to bring the magic to one of those. But yeah, quite the bucket list. I think that was during the switchbacks we started talking about that, and somehow we lost count and we stopped talking about bucket list, and we just tried to make sure we got up there alive. But the bucket list is an interesting concept. I got a couple weeks away from making mine now.
So one thing we all have on our bucket list as high pointers is Mount Whitney. Now we have Tommy in Massachusetts, we have Tom in New Jersey, we have Matt in Austin, and we have Meredith in New York City. How did you all meet and decide to do Mount Whitney together? How do you know each other?
We met at the last convention in South Dakota. And I'm going to actually flip it over, if I can, to Matt, because this is really a Matt and Meredith initiation thing. Because Tommy and I were just sitting here unhappy because we hadn't won the Whitney lottery, thinking that we're done, we got no shot. If the thing's impossible, nobody wins it. And then I'll turn it over to Matt and Meredith because fortuitously, that's how we got back in the game.
Yeah. I'll add one thing. So we were in South Dakota for the convention last year, 2024. And Tom and I had, we're going out to the trail to do the high point that morning. And Tom had done it a few weeks before with his daughter, Julianne, on a cross-country trip up in the Black Hills. So we decided to go in the reverse order on, I think, Trail 9 it was. So we went in through the outdoor. And because we did the reverse order to make it a new experience, about a mile up, I think, or maybe, or so, or an hour into it, Matt was coming down. So that's where we met Matt. We met Matt on the trail in South Dakota for the first time. And if Tom didn't hike it with Julianne already, or if we decided to go the regular way, we would never have met Matt. So those are the little things that happened. We were standing at the trail looking at the map. Remember that, Tom? And we said, which way should we go? We said, let's do it this way. It's just a different experience. If we didn't make that decision, we never would have met Matt. We never would have been on Whitney with him a year later. But we did stop to talk to him. He was alone. And, we are, if nothing but cordial. So we talked for a while to Matt, got his story, enjoyed each other's company for about 15 minutes, took a few photos, and I'll let him take it from here. But just a random chance, right? That what trail do you take? How long do you take to get there?
Yeah.
If we found the continental breakfast, we might not have met Matt, right? We couldn't find the coffee station, but Matt, take it away.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I was trying to sneak by on the trail, and Tommy goes, "Hello there. Are you a high pointer?" And from there, that's how it started the relationship. And oddly enough, Meredith and I, we actually went to high school together. So she's a year older than me. We went to high school together. since Meredith graduated, I don't think we had seen each other. So we probably hadn't seen each other in 20 plus years. And I'm sitting in the lobby reading a book at the
Highpointer
Best Western
convention, right?
Ramkota.
Okay.
This is the South Dakota convention. Yeah. I'm sitting there. And then I see two women walk by, and I was like, she kind of looks familiar. And we kind of do a double take. And then she comes back around the corner and she's like, are you Matt Balthazar? And I was like, are you Meredith Bennett? And she's like, what are you doing here? And I said, I think I'm doing the same thing that you're doing here. I think I'm at the Highpointers convention. And,
wow.
And so sure enough, we both, after not seeing each other for 20 plus years, living on different sides of the country, both converged for the high pointing convention in South Dakota. And we hung out there, and we kind of said, hey, with the convention in Bishop the next year, let's try to do Whitney. And that's how we stayed connected.
That is so cool. And for the listeners who don't know, this is my first time hearing that as well. So I was not expecting that. I did not see that coming at all, that you guys went to high school together. What a cool coincidence. So Meredith,
it's very I was just going to say it was very random, because I don't think, like Matt said, neither of us had really talked to each other, and neither of us knew the other was high pointing. So it was so funny. I cannot tell you my shock. I think when we both saw each other in South Dakota, of all places. So it just goes to show how small the world is.
So then who got the Whitney permit, the coveted Whitney permit?
I did.
Okay.
So I was lucky enough to
all applied,
submit it.
And Matt is the winner.
Okay.
And so we had a permit for 4 people. And so I texted Meredith that day and said, hey, we got it. Now we've got a difficult decision to make we've got 2 extra spots. And, anyone who's done long hiking, and especially done Whitney, that you got to be very selective in terms of who you choose, because there's a lot of time on the trail. It's got to be someone that you want to spend time with. That you don't mind 18 hours of conversation and silence and other things. And so we kind of went through the list of, thoughts of, do you have any friends that you want to have? Do I have any friends that I want to have? And we both kind of on our list had, what about Tom and Tommy? And so that's how we just, they rose to the top, and we said, let's throw it out there and see if they're interested.
So then you contact Tom and Tommy, said, hey, we got this permit. Are you guys in or what? Tom, what was your reaction? Were either of you like, I need to train right now?
We were like, we're all in immediately. That's phenomenal. We were both, it wasn't kind of on our radar at that point. We had thought about doing it. We knew we were going to go to the convention, but, the lottery is something that's hard for anybody who's applied, knows that Matt's a very lucky man to have been successful. And look, think about it. We hadn't really talked to Matt or Meredith at all since South Dakota, right? We went to the convention. We were all off in our various locations, living our lives, doing our thing. So, Tommy and I were immediately back and forth, like, oh my God, do you believe this is awesome? And we're like, we're all in immediately.
Yeah. So how long, what was the time frame between you find out you got the permit to the date that you hike? How much time did you have in between?
When do you find out? March or middle of March? Is that when you get notified of whether you won the lottery? And our permit was for September 23rd, September 22nd, somewhere around there.
Enough time to make us be like, do we have enough time to get ready to do this? To start putting training plans in place to make sure that we'd be ready to do it.
We said yes right away. And then before we had, fully researched what it's going to take to train and whatnot, we just knew how hard it is to get the permit. And we said, absolutely, we're in, 100%. And then we said, who's Matt? Which one was Matt again? No, but it was a no-brainer for us. Really, it was unbelievable. And I think the lack of research, the lack of effort put in to the planning, helped us say yes. We were so excited to do it, and I think we had just about the right amount of time, to be honest with you, to be excited about it, to come up with a list of what to do, to not do it for maybe a couple of weeks or a month, and then to restart and start doing it in earnest and really train hard. So it was enough to delay it a little bit, celebrate the win, but with the permit, but not enough to have to get working right away. But it was quite the epic. I remember it like it was yesterday. Tom reached out and immediately said yes. We were so happy. Matt changed our life, quite literally changed our life with that invitation.
It's interesting because then you also, the immediate excitement then is all the doubts and like, oh, okay. So, Matt and Meredith are obviously very accomplished hikers, have hiked a lot, have been doing a lot of high points. And we're like, all right, we now want to be worthy of the invitation and not screw it up and not hold them back and make sure that we're able to do it and enjoy the whole thing. So, ChatGPT became our best friend in terms of training plans for Mount Whitney in X amount of months to get ready and so forth.
Well, that leads me into my next question. So for all of us who live in states with no 14ers, how did you train? Meredith, let's start with you. What was your training regimen like?
Yeah, so I'm thankful enough at least to live close enough to mountains where I can get up to them pretty easily. I think you also have to get creative. I mean, I have done many training sessions in a park in New York City that just has lots of stairs. And I have put on mountaineering boots and I have gone to that park and I've gotten, with a heavy backpack and I've gotten a lot of questions from people in that park. So I think, again, you just have to sometimes get a little creative. But I think, for me, it's just a lot of, long hours on the step mill. I bring, my phone, I watch movies, I watch TV shows. It's just kind of the long, putting in some long hours.
Yeah, I get in distance running, they call it long, slow distance, where you just put in those like miles, you're just piling them up. And I think it's just the same in training for a climb. I remember when I was here in North Carolina, just on a Stairmaster with a ruck on my back. And I got a lot of uphill training, didn't get a lot of downhill training. And that came back to bite me on a couple mountains. But Matt, how did you train in Texas?
Mine was more focused on cardio, so long distance running. And here in Austin, we do have hills, but they're very much hills. They're not mountains. And so just trying to get some hill work in while doing running, and then supplementing that with some strength training as well, of either a stair climber or just weightlifting and that sort of thing, but trying to really focus on cardio and be in good cardiovascular shape, and then try to get some strength in my legs with other ways of training. Yeah, you can't beat a good endurance workout just day after day after day. Yep. And then when you come face to face with altitude, it's like you go slow, but if you're well trained, then you give yourself the time, I guess. Even when you're going slow, you give yourself the time to acclimate. Tom, what was your training regimen like in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, probably more similar to Meredith's, with a lot of Stairmaster, a lot of gym kind of stuff. Same, we have sort of one big hill near where I live. So I went up and down that hill a bunch of times. I think that in retrospect, maybe not enough. Like, I wish 2020 hindsight that I had done more, like when you're saying downhill versus uphill. I probably did more cardio. I think, as Matt's saying, weight training certainly would have been helpful. Tommy and I also sort of mapped out a couple of the high points that were, because on the East Coast we can drive to a lot of them.
Yeah.
So what did we do, Tommy? We did. We went up to Vermont and we did the Vermont High Point, which was good just to sort of, not be climbing up and down a local hill, but actually be in the environment. And I think that was helpful.
That's cool. Tommy, did you do anything special for this training?
Yes. I wanted to lose weight. I was a little heavier coming out of the winter. I definitely get pack on the pounds during the football playoff season and whatnot. So I figured if I lost 20 or 25 pounds, which I could lose over that amount of time, that's the weight of my backpack. So I was really concerned with the weight I was going to be traveling up Whitney with, So I was thinking about weight and distance a lot. I joined the gym and didn't really go because the weather was nice here. So I did everything outside. Tom and I talked a lot about how do we mirror what we're going to be doing out in Whitney. You know what I mean? Different things there's a hill in town called Peppercorn Hill. It's 250 feet. I'd go up and down that 6 times. Right. It just go up and down, up and down, up and down. It takes like 5 to 7 minutes each time or whatnot. So I was challenging myself with that. But that gets a little boring. I did a lot of, there's hills around on the streets around here. So I did some asphalt walking, but just again, a couple hours, right. Just to get loose, those types of things. Up in New Hampshire, we did, we have a place up there. My wife and I, she really helped me out, to be honest with you. She was along for the ride. I don't like walking alone. I like to talk and kind of be social with it. So we did Mount Shakura, we did the north-south moats, we didn't do any 4,000 footers in preparation, but a lot of local hikes near North Conway that were same 3,000 footers. Shakura is such a great hike. We did Little Sister, that was like an 8-hour hike. Moats was like a 5-hour hike. So I was really trying to get time. And Tom, you actually inspired me. Julianne, you guys did the New York City hike across New York City, right? I think that was a 20-mile hike.
Yes.
Right.
Which we're doing, Meredith, next year. Put that on the calendar.
So that starts in Harlem and ends up in Brooklyn,
which is one end of Manhattan to the other. Yeah, and we end in so we did that, which was awesome because it was not elevation but distance, and it was good really just to kind of get the legs used to long distance a little bit.
Yeah. So Tommy, you brought up something that made me think about my Army days when depending on what training you're going into, and I didn't do anything like my husband does, like he was in Ranger school and all that, but one of the things that they stress is like you don't do things in perfect condition. Like you don't train in perfect conditions, although that is the strongest urge, I want to have a cup of coffee, digest my breakfast, maybe wait until the sun comes up. But we don't get to, we don't have control over the environment that we're going to be in. So it's hard, but sometimes you have to just take the conditions as they are. Maybe you do a workout hungry, or you do a workout before you've had coffee, or you do a workout at 3 a.m. Maybe you do a workout when it's raining or something like that. But the perfect conditions are not going to wait for you. And it's the hardest thing, but it's so necessary sometimes.
For sure.
Laura, not to jump ahead here, but doing it hungry would have been helpful on Whitney because although I had a backpack full of stuff I couldn't eat, like my body would not accept any food, didn't want it. And so it would have been helpful to kind of prepare for that and train hungry.
Well, the more you know, I guess. We all learn.
But I think, Lauren, that's a great point.
Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the mindset that we kind of developed over time. It was, I mentioned that hill. I got bored with that. It was too known after a while, so we did a 17-mile hike through Worcester, Massachusetts, just mimicking the New York City hike. It was up and down through Park City streets. That when I did that in August, I said I can make the 20 miles. I knew then. I said, okay, I can do that. Because that was 17. But for the most part, we talked about I think I did go to the gym once at midnight or 1 a.m. to see if I could wake up and actually do something physical at midnight because we were starting we had a 1-day permit, right? So, it's a 24-hour gym. And I didn't do that again, but I said, we'll get there when we get there. But I think when we went to, Tom, we also went to Michigan, right? We flew into Wisconsin. We did Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. We did a 3-state high pointing trip late July, I think, or mid-July, right around there. And that really got us in the mindset of high pointing again. Because sometimes we forget we're high pointers when it's coming out of the winter, and you always say it's a seasonal thing. But that got us thinking, and there was a lot of driving between those high points. We hit them all in about 3 days, and we really got a chance to talk. Tom's trainer at home had put a spreadsheet together of workouts for 13 weeks. and incorporated massage, stretching, some of the weight things to do, which, a lot of it we could do at home, right? A lot of the things we could do here. So that was essential to have that. We talked about it in the car. We were in the car for about 10 to 13 hours. We talked about all of the planning, chat GPT. So really that high pointing trip was a planning session for Whitney, for Tom and I, and it was really, I love that trip, Tom. It was one of our favorites. And then that's when we incorporated.
That was a great trip, yeah.
It was a great trip. And we said,
and we didn't even run into the mosquitoes.
Well, we were.
That was my next question. Those high points in July?
Yeah.
We were very nervous about the Minnesota mosquitoes from the research that we did. We had the mosquito masks, we had the whole deal.
Yeah.
And we were fine. Didn't end up hitting any.
Wow.
Yeah, we went out.
Wow, you're the only people I've heard say that.
The research that we did told us when to leave, and it was very accurate. Because it said leave like really, really early before they wake up and before they come out to as the day goes on and as things get hotter, they become a lot more prevalent. So, but yeah, that was a great trip. I mean, we did Michigan, we did Minnesota, we did Wisconsin, and it did sort of get us geared up.
We learned to trust the information on that trip. Like we were like, all right. So what we read about Whitney
on the mosquitoes.
It was accurate on the mosquitoes. So we said, all right, whatever it says about Whitney, we're gonna believe it.
At any point in your training, did you guys discuss how the training is going and what the plan is for Whitney? Tom, can you start us off?
We did. Meredith probably should start it off because she was the one who was really sort of getting geared up for it. So I'll
Meredith, how did that go?
Yeah, I think the Zoom calls were helpful. I guess what I didn't mention in my training regimen is I actually had to pause training for a good 2 months or so due to a back injury. So I had a pretty serious injury. I'd actually been training for Gannett, which I was not able to do. And so that kind of threw Whitney into question. And I remember one of our first Zoom calls, we were kind of getting prepared, getting our gear situated, kind of talking about a game plan. And I remember sharing with the group, guys, I kind of don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, this climb. It was really uncertain, but I think, thankfully I recovered in time. I did do probably the minimal amount of training I would recommend for anyone. But I think those prep calls were really helpful because I think it allowed us to be all on the same page about, our start time, what we were going to do if we happened to split up, fueling, water. I think that was my takeaway, is just being organized and kind of all being on the same page about your plan for the day was really important. And these guys were all very supportive, and I'm so happy that I recovered in time to do the hike.
Yeah. Did you guys go over like packing lists and stuff like that? Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that was one of the best things about our planning calls, is to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. Because you can read trip reports, you can read other people's experiences, but it was really helpful to talk through things together. How many layers are you bringing? What are you going to start out at? How much food do we want to bring? How much water do we think we're going to filter on the trail, et cetera? And so to be able to divide up some of those key pieces so everyone's not carrying all of the supplies, but we can rely on each other and bounce ideas off, I think was really helpful.
Yeah. So
nobody discussed adding a belt in, though, as I recall, during those planning calls.
Wasn't on the list.
Yeah.
We figured we could bring.
Matt became.
We said we could bring rope. It could be a belt.
Story there. Going up. I was wearing a brick because I'm all excited, right? We're climbing Mount Whitney. So I got a brand new pair of hiking pants that I hadn't worn previously. And what I didn't realize is that I needed a belt, because poor Meredith, as she's walking behind me, I'm like pulling my pants up constantly. And finally, Matt had like a rope, and he gave that to me. And that was great. It helped for the rest of the trip. So it shows, be prepared. And sometimes you have to get creative in terms of, how you keep things going.
I had that happen to me with a pair of hiking pants on Rainier. By any chance, were your hiking pants REI brand hiking pants?
No, they were not. But I have had REI hiking pants, and they tend to get looser.
Yeah.
As you're moving.
They do. They sure do.
Don't wear anything
perfectly at the bottom.
Wear only what you've worn before on a Whitney hike. Be very comfortable in your clothing.
Yes.
You can't wear a pair. It was a nice pair, though. It was but they looked very comfortable.
You know what? It was a nice pair of pants.
Yes,
when they were
fitted. Yeah, no, I remember the first call we had. It was July, I think. We got together, midsummer, and when Meredith told us that she was coming off the surgery, I was very surprised. I mean, it was the first thing she said, and I was like, I'm not tearing up, but it was like, oh my God, she has to do it. Like I talked to Tom after. I'm like, she's going to do it. I was like, yeah, she's going to do it. We don't know Meredith that well. Now we do. And obviously, if we knew her that well now, I know she would have done it. But it's pretty amazing. Yeah. You were pretty upset on that call, and that you had to tell us that I might not be able to do it.
Look, and I will. And I thought it was great. I will tell you this, Meredith. I don't think I told you this. Right when, so we had that immediate first call, and you are trying to get to know people and get a read on people. And both Tommy and I, after that, were like, she's going to do it. Like, just based on kind of you and the way that you were, like a lot of people, you'd be like, okay. That's like, they're throwing it out there early. And I could tell you 3 months from now, they're ultimately going to bail on it and they won't do it. But with you, we were like, no, she's going to, whatever it is, she's going to work her way through it and she's going to end up doing it. So, and you did.
Yeah.
Impressive.
That is so serious to have a back injury and then to put a heavy pack on your back a couple months later and climb 14,000 feet. That is really incredible what you ended up doing. Okay. So you're all at the convention in Bishop, California, the beautiful Eastern Sierra Nevada mountains, and you're trained up, you've got your permit. What's the itinerary? What time do you start? Where do you all meet up?
Yeah. So our permit was for Monday. And so I think we all got to Bishop Wednesday, Thursday timeframe. And our collective goal at the time was, let's get to some elevation so we prepare ourselves as best as possible. And we each did it a little differently. In terms of hikes that we were doing, or places we were going during the day, or places we were sleeping at night to be able to get to some elevation. But we do that, and then we go to the convention ends Sunday night or Sunday afternoon. We drive to Lone Pine, and we're all staying at the Mount Whitney hostel there. Mm-hmm. And our plan, it had kind of evolved over time, but our plan was start at midnight, which I think was new for just about all of us. So that was quite an experience, and one that I wish I was a little bit more prepared for, because trying to go to bed at 4:00 and trying to decide what your meals are, trying to decide what time you get up, that's one of the things that at least I was pretty unprepared for.
Yeah. Meredith, how did that start time in the itinerary feel for you?
Yeah, I think, I've done alpine starts before, but I think this was probably the most aggressive one. And like Matt said, it's just really hard to fall asleep at 4:00 in the afternoon. And just because you're excited, I think I woke up a few times and was making sure I had packed everything. So you kind of have those nerves as well.
Yeah. Can we talk about the trailhead? Were you guys one of the only people there starting at midnight, or was it packed? Also, did you see any bears at the trailhead?
Yeah, no wildlife that I remember.
No.
No.
Were you guys the only ones there starting at that time? Tom?
We were not the only ones, but it wasn't, a crowd of people. I mean, there were a few other folks, as I remember, that were sort of milling around a little bit. I will say, though, with the time, that was probably the biggest back and forth conversation we had with do we start at midnight? Do we start at 11 o'clock so that we're at, the Whitney entrance point at midnight? Do we start at 3 a.m.? Like, we were back and forth and finally determined midnight just to give us as much time as possible.
Yep.
But I will say that I think was really helpful is I think we all four of us did this kind of separately is we went to the trailhead during daylight the day before our climb and kind of scoped it out, saw the parking situation. Because again, you're arriving at midnight, it's pitch black. And I think that was a critical part of our plan is to kind of go and just see where we would be starting, see what things look like. It made the start, I think, for me at least, a lot more comfortable and hopefully everyone else as well.
Yeah. That is a really good idea. I didn't even think of doing that with between daylight and going up there at midnight. Tommy, what were you going to say?
I think I was going to say the same thing. Doing that dry run, right? The little recon mission the afternoon before was essential. We knew the road going up there. We knew how long it was going to take. We knew exactly where we were, and it only took about an hour and a half, right? It was that was probably one of the most. It made me feel very comfortable because when we were at the hotel, we were at the Whitney Portal Hotel. We're in room 1, and you walk out the door, and you can see Mount Whitney right there. You can see it, and it was just the first time, I think, in all my high pointing trips that you could see, your opponent. Right? You're looking at it. It was crazy, and I think Meredith, someone said, "Hey, let's drive up there. Let's check it out. We're going to go up there," and we did that, and I thought it just made me feel very comfortable that it looked like a normal trailhead. We knew where we were going to go. We did get a prime parking spot that morning.
I felt really comfortable on the ride, though.
No, I kind of had a little panic thing going on. On the ride up.
The ride up was crazy.
I mean, you're right over there's no guardrail. I mean, and that's a windy road going up to Whitney. And I just kind of looked over the side and he was driving and I kind of flashed a little vertigo. I was having a hard time. I was like, wow, this is, and he's like, you're driving in the dark. I don't drive in the dark. And I'm like, I'm driving this tomorrow. But I was more worried about the path up there, going over the edge or something like that. But no, it put everything in perspective. It made it feel much more doable. All right, we're going to drive up, we're going to get out of the car, and we're going to go do it. But we did get the 2 best parking spots, I think, in the whole place. So that was good.
So you guys stayed at the Whitney Portal. Did you go to that pizza place across the street?
I think Matt went at 10 o'clock at night and got a pizza before.
You talk about, yeah. You talk about your whole night being thrown off when you're waking up at 11:30 to go to the portal. Well, I woke up. I took about 2 naps. I think I got in bed at 4 o'clock, fell asleep at 4:15, woke up at probably 5:30. Rummaged around in bed for a while, and then woke up again at 8. And just not tired anymore because I'd just taken these 2 naps. But I realized I was like, I'm hungry. And so I did. I ordered a barbecue chicken pizza from the place across the street and went and picked it up at 8:30 and ate it in my room. I'm not sure that's recommended in the guidebook of kind of how to nutrition plan for a hike. But I did, in fact, get a pizza from that place.
I mean, good call. I went there after my climb, but before is always an extra adventure.
You will know it is.
So you get to the trailhead at midnight, you take off. What's the first thing you're thinking of? Are you like, oh, we're all at the same pace, this is great, or was there a difference?
Yeah, we started out and we had talked ahead of time about being very intentional in our pace. As part of the convention, I did boundary on Friday, so 3 days before. And that was the biggest lesson I learned is I went way too fast up and way too fast down, and I was just exhausted afterwards. And so that was a big wake-up call of, yes, you can go faster, but we need to be thinking on the long term here, not the short term. And so we had kind of set a pace of between 1 and 2 miles an hour is kind of what we had been thinking of. And we had made the conscious decision that we're going to stay together through the switchbacks up to Trail Crest. And so we would go kind of very intentionally slow. We took our breaks. And And there were times where we'd be a little bit of an accordion where we'd spread out, but then we'd stop and we all come back together, especially when we were hiking in the dark, because the first 6 hours of our hike, pitch black. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were staying together, we were being methodical in our pace, and not in any hurry to get to the top.
Yeah, that's a great plan. And I didn't even think about all the darkness when you start at midnight. I did the Mountaineers route when I did Whitney, and I mean, I'm not gonna say we took it easy, but we did start at like 7. And Tommy, you were gonna say?
Yeah, I just think again we kind of got together late afternoon on Sunday. We were climbing on Monday, and we talked about pace. I had written out every half mile. What's the elevation gain over the half mile? Because I'm always thinking elevation gain. And Tom's always thinking distance. And between the two of us, we kind of can figure that out as we go through. Hey, how many miles do we have left? I'm like, God, it doesn't matter how many miles. We still have we have 4,000 feet left. All of that kind of comes into play. So we added up, broken down every half mile, how we were going to attack it, and it's really, when you do that, it wasn't very intimidating. I think 500 might be the most feet per half mile, the whole thing, or 400 feet, but I think when we got together, Matt said, okay, let's go 3 miles without stopping. I remember he said that. Let's go the first 3 miles to trail camp. Let's get there, but let's not get there before, 2.5 hours in. So, Matt was our fearless leader in this thing. It's funny how people's personalities and traits, he had a good game plan, and he was the one who was going to keep us on pace as we went up. So he was going to be the one tracking our pace. And when we got to trail camp, I think Tom and I were looking at each other like, we're not going to stop for 3 hours, for 3 miles. But it was, we had our water, we had our snacks, we can eat on the go. And, I thought it was a really good plan to have one person really be concentrating on the pace. He kind of led us through. And to me, it was very smart, the way we kind of collaborated together on how to go slow early so we could finish strong and get to the top once we get up there. It was pretty cool hiking at night, and we think we didn't want any missteps. We wanted to make sure we could see, that was a really risky part, I guess, in the dark, so we just were in total control that first 6 hours, 7 hours. I thought it went very well, versus the plan, but it was deliberate and it was intentional and it was talked about, for a bunch of times, and really, we relied on each other to take everybody's piece of it. Matt did a great job of setting the pace, so good start for us. I think on the trail, really good start.
So, Tom, how did it feel for you those first couple miles?
Absolutely horrible. No, I'm kidding. No, I thought I agree with everything everybody said. I mean, of the group, I was the slowest along the route. And so, the way that Matt described it around the accordion, I was typically the back of the accordion, and, Matt and others were more the front of the accordion. And I think we did a really good job, especially for that first section, getting to where we wanted to get to, and then through the switchbacks and so forth. And then I think we did a really good job sort of going off on our own pace for the rest of it. I do remember the dark was kind of cool until we hit that one point where there were logs and water, and it was dark and it was logs and it was slippery. And I think you guys navigated that more adeptly than I did. And so that was the first point during it that I was like, okay, I'm going to have to really kind of keep focused and stay with the group and so forth. But, Matt did a great job leading, and then we did switch around a little bit. Yep. People would take the front and take the lead, and I thought we did a good job.
Yeah. Meredith, so can you talk about how those first couple miles felt, especially recovering from a back injury?
Yeah, I think, as everyone has said, we set a really nice kind of slow, intentional pace. We had all day, and we wanted to kind of, finish as strong as we could. I think coming off the injury, again, the pace was great. Something that I will never forget is, I think we had all talked about, gosh, what's that going to look like? Because we were planning to be, 6-7 hours in the dark. I don't think I'd ever spent that much time, kind of just walking in complete darkness. And there was one point where we were kind of on a rocky section, We had paused to kind of regroup and catch up with each other. And we all just said, like, let's turn off our headlamps. Everyone look up. And we just looked at the stars and just sat there for a minute. And the sky was incredible. And I live in a city. I don't get to see, skies like that. And I think sometimes we forget when we're so, goal focused and we're trying to get to the summit. You just kind of have to stop and look around at where you are. And for me, that was one of the most memorable points during the hike. And again, we were in complete darkness, and it was just kind of that point in the morning where it felt kind of like a slog. Like, when is the sun going to come up? We're all, kind of starting to feel it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I didn't think about how dark it gets there.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
You're so right, though, Meredith, because if we hadn't consciously said do it, we wouldn't have done it. We would have just kept going.
No, I remember that too. It's very specific memory. It's funny how, coming back down, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. I was looking for that spot where we stopped on the way back down. You know what I mean? Because we were coming down, and I'm just, wherever that was, we were like lying under the stars, and it was just pretty amazing how lit up it was in the complete darkness. Right? You could see that. I think I saw the Milky Way for the first time. Like everybody says they can see it. You could see it that night. It was clear, and we had great weather. We're so fortunate for that. And, I think when we stopped there, I'm like, we're going to do this. I'm here now. I kind of refocused a little bit, and I said, we're going to be able to make it. All of us are going to make it. I was so that's when I knew all four of us were going to get up there. And Nancy, whoever it was, we had someone join us on the hike a little bit there for a while. But, she was there. But I think that was, those are the things you're not going to read on all trails. Those are the things you're not going to see in an article. The things that you remember the most are the things that just kind of happen organically. The rope belt, stopping at the stars. But I think that's when I knew we're going to make it. And I said, Matt, what are we, halfway? And he's like, no, we're about 4 miles in. But that was, I'm like, Matt, I don't want to hear honesty here. I want you to tell me, how easy it's going to be the rest of the way. But I thought the terrain was manageable for me, coming from the Northeast. I thought the rock and the white rock and the trail markings, we're all getting very familiar. You can lose your way up there a little bit if in the dark, if you kind of take a left for 4 steps, that's not the way to go. But a couple times you'd have to turn around and come back. So I think that first couple miles was really, for me, it was like, okay, I could do it. Not that I didn't think I could do it. I was hoping I could do it. I hope the weather was going to be good. I hope the Foxhole 4 was going to be good. The preparation, the food. And I said, all right, if we made it this far, we're going to go all the way. And,
yeah, you're right, Tommy, because there's so much planning and thinking, but you don't know, your elevation breakdown. It's like it all gets up in your head, and you're like, what is this really going to be like? And then once you do it and you see it and you feel it, and it's like, okay, you reconcile it to what you were thinking it might be, and you're like, we can do this.
So what does it start to feel like when you gain considerable elevation, maybe like after the sun comes up? Matt, can you talk about that?
The sun coming up in my hike, that was a game changer. And we had given ourselves about 6 hours to get up to trail camp. And that's where we're going to take a longer break. We're going to eat more food. We're going to filter water. And that just kind of coincided. We got there in about 5.5 hours, and you just start to see the sun come up. And at this point, I wasn't sure how anyone else was feeling, because I knew how I was feeling, and I was starting to get nauseous. This lack of sleep was catching up to me, and the pizza caught up to me at Outpost Camp. But yes, it just all of this is catching up to you. And so we get there, and I needed to take a nap. I took a little 10-minute cat nap at trail camp. And when I woke up, you see the glow of the sun coming up. You're at 10,000-ish feet, watching the sunrise hit the peaks of the mountains, and it was game changing for my morale to be able to say, wait, all right, we can do this. It's starting to warm up, because it's gotten pretty cold hiking in the dark, especially when you stop. And so you start to feel that warmth. You get the sunlight. took some medicine, took some fluids, took some food. And when the sun came up, that's where, for me, it was like, all right, this is going to happen. Let's do this. And so we filtered water there. I'll never forget just watching the sunrise at 10,000 feet in the mountains. And some of the pictures that we got don't even do it justice, even though they were pretty incredible. But then it was like, all right, let's take on the switchbacks. Like, this is a new chapter. We're turning that page of the dark. Yep. And now it's a new chapter. Let's hit the switchbacks and keep going.
Yeah, you're right about those sunrises. And the picture too, how it doesn't do it justice. I think that is one of my favorite memories of Whitney are the sunrises. Camped there 2 nights, and it was myself, my husband, and a guide. And we got to know the guide really well. He just became like a friend after a couple hours, and it was just, we're just eating dinner, drinking apple cider, watching sunrise, or breakfast or whatever it was, eating a meal, drinking apple cider, getting ready for the day, watching the sunrise. I'm like, this is so cool. I don't know if I'll ever see this again. I mean, it's hard to describe. And of course I took a picture, and I looked at it later. I'm like, oh, this isn't, you had to be there. So when I did Whitney, I did the Mountaineers route. At what elevation do the switchbacks start?
A little over 10, I think.
Okay. Tom, can you start us off at the switchbacks? What are you feeling? How does it look?
Yeah, I mean, first, Matt really rallied in an incredible way there, right? Because at that point, we had a chance to just sort of take a deep breath, absorb it all, take it all in. And Matt, I didn't say this to you, but I was really happy for that little bit of time there, right? Because, our fearless leader was taking a little bit of time. So it's like, great, I can legitimately take some time. And I needed that too. So it was good. Also, there were a lot of things that I had not done before that, both Matt and Meredith were great. Tommy and I, like filtering water, right? We hadn't been on a hike where filtering water mattered in terms of the amount of time and the amount of water you were able to have. So we took some time. You showed me you had your cool little plastic thing that you used in order to get the water into the right spot. So I not only was I loving just the environment and the views and all that, but I felt like I was learning something. I felt like I was advancing my high pointing, my mountaineering skills, which was kind of cool. Right. And then the switchback started. And I do remember, you start out and you start counting and you get it about 4 in. You're like, I'm not counting this. This is ridiculous. There's too many of them. And I do think there was some really good back and forth discussion then, because just the nature of the switchbacks, couple of people would be up on one switchback, couple of people would be down here. So you were able to really see each other and interact. So I just remember kind of, that was a fun part of the climb, right? There was a lot of good discussion and back and forth, and we were making progress.
Yeah. Is anyone feeling sick at any point from the switchbacks to the summit with the altitude?
Not me. I handled it pretty well for me. We went out there Thursday and we acclimated to the area. We stayed at, I think 10,000 feet, Tom. We were up at Rock Creek.
Yeah.
So, for me, I never hit to get the altitude, except, obviously we got to the trail crest, and the last couple miles takes a little bit, but Matt was feeling it. I could tell Matt was not comfortable for a while. And Tom, you might have been a little bit uncomfortable as well.
Well, when I was hallucinating at the end, it definitely affected me,
I was like, Matt needed that break, right? Matt needed that rest there. And I was worried about, wow, this is happening, right? Everything that we talked about, somebody was feeling something, and we all kind of were experiencing it as we went up together. But he rallied pretty good. I was able to eat, I think, the whole way, little gel packs and eating when I wasn't hungry. Someone had told me, maybe it was, I think Terry Bird set me straight after a meeting. He jumped in the car, we drove him back. He goes, It's just a long walk. You're going to be able to do it. Just make sure you drink and eat the whole way, even if you're not hungry, you're not thirsty, because you will be. You are, and you can't tell. And I was like, Terry Bird. All right, let's go. If Terry Bird says I can do it, we're going to do it.
Records for the club.
I've had Terry on. Yeah, he's really interesting. He can talk about like the cat that's had the most high points or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I was like, I had his words in my head, just saying, all right, just make sure you eat when you're not hungry, and just keep going. But I think Matt rallied. That was pretty impressive, Matt, to be honest with you. Thinking about it afterwards, like I felt good the whole time, and then you don't feel good, right? It's doable. It's hard. And then Tom, I think you said it's brutal, and then it's impossible. Like that, those are the stages of the hike. It's fun. It's doable. It's hard. It's brutal. It's impossible. And I think as we were going up, it was quite the challenge to be able to understand your body and trust it and just not push it to the limit. But to see somebody recover from a little bit of a struggle was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that is really good advice. Eating and drinking when you're neither hungry nor thirsty. I say that it's great advice, even though I've never taken it. And it has caused me to vomit usually when I get back down from a mountain, and it's because I'm dehydrated or I didn't eat. But I have a hard time just like turning around. Even though I feel like garbage, I'll just go to the summit and go, I'll be sick. It's all right. So what are the switchbacks like? I've never done the switchbacks. Is it just kind of like a blur? You just go back and forth until you're at the summit? Or, I mean, I know you stop counting, but like, what are you thinking of during all the switchbacks?
You know what you feel a little bit like? If anybody's ever gone to Disney and they have the lines where you're back and forth.
Where you see the same people.
And you sort of feel
like, the airport.
Are we ever going to get to the end of this thing? Because they do. And as I recall, in the beginning, they seemed shorter. And then as we got higher, they were longer.
We counted, when we started counting, we started counting 4 or 5, and then we stopped and we got distracted talking about something else. And then we said, we're probably around 9 or 10. And we would do that kind of off and on. And next thing we knew, we were at 40 something. And I feel like you hear about the switchbacks as being this daunting, long, monotonous slog up. And so I think in my head, I had built that up to be one of the more difficult parts mentally. But then when you're going up, and like Tom said, some at the bottom are fairly straightforward, kind of before you get to the cables section, you realize, wait a minute, we're halfway through this, and it hasn't been all that bad. We're actually going to get up to the top, and I can't wait to look over Trail Crest and see Kings Canyon and Sequoia. So to me, that was the if we could get through the switchbacks, then we could make this happen. And so it was the most daunting piece. But because I had mentally prepared myself for that, it didn't feel as bad as we were getting through. And next thing you know, you're halfway there and you're like, oh, we're really going to make it through this section.
We're going to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's always a good idea to do like as much research as you can before any high point or big mountain or whatever. But sometimes when you read these trip reports, you read about other people's fears or whatever they find daunting. And then you just assume that onto yourself. And then, sometimes as it happens, like you said, Matt, you get to that point in the hike and you're like, well, I'm having a different experience in a good way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, Tommy, remember that one podcast I sent you?
Yes.
And you're like, why did you send me that podcast? It was like 3 brothers and one of the, and they all seemed like they were pretty ready to go. I think they might have been in the military. They were in good shape. Yeah. And they were like, the one guy had to stop and he had altitude sickness and he couldn't go on. And no.
Some of
it's also those stories, Tom, and we were talking about this in our last podcast, but did you die stories that get the most clicks, that get the most attention. Right. So that's probably why it appeared in your algorithm.
Right.
Tommy, what were you going to say?
No, it was just, you listen, I had to stop listening to podcasts. I had a book I was reading from someone climbed from Death Valley all the way up to the top of Whitney, and I started reading that, and I'm like, I just said, you know what? I can't absorb anything else. I know myself. I know what I can do. And it's same thing going up the switchbacks. You just lose it. Like you can't even count anymore. You don't want to know. You just want to kind of do, right? And you're going through it. And it's, out here, in New England, you could see the trail. It's dirt. It's brown. You'd be able to see every switchback if you looked at the mountain. When we were down at camp and looking up, you can't tell where the trail is. You don't know what they look like, right? They're just the way the terrain is. Like, so you can't visualize it when you're standing there, at least for me. I'm used to being able to see, you can see each trail, like, okay, there they are. But this is just a sheet of white or in a mountain. So when you're climbing through it, you don't know how many are left visually, or like you lose count and those types of things. So you just kind of lose yourself to the moment. And I remember getting to the last one is the longest one, or like the last, we got up to the top and you have to come around the corner, right? And we were like, are we still on the switchbacks? Are we in the right spot? Because someone looked like they were up in the top left. We didn't know exactly where. We lost track at the top, but it was perfect the way they had the last one, because you didn't come around the corner and boom, you're done. And it was pretty amazing that all of a sudden, like, all right, we know exactly where we're at. We're done with the switchbacks. I don't know how we just did that, but let's go. We get the next piece. So for me, it was like, you can always look ahead and see, or at least on a lot of them. And this one, you lose track of where we're at. Some are short, some are long. And then you pass somebody who you just passed back there. You don't remember them passing you, right? Like someone is sitting there eating M&Ms. You're like, I just passed that guy, but like I said, 10 switchbacks back. When did he pass us? So you do see people, and you even lose track of who's ahead of you and who's behind you, because people are stopping, and it is pretty daunting. That's what I think I noticed the elevation the most, right? Climbing that one. And it just reminded me of Vermont. I'm like, Vermont was like 5 hours straight up. And I'm like, all right, we just did Vermont about a month ago. We're going to be able to handle this, so experience matters, but it's hard to replicate that, to be honest, obviously.
So Meredith, can you take us to the summit from the switchbacks?
Yeah, I think at this point we started to split up a little bit. I think I forgot where, but of course, you reach trail crest and then you can kind of see where you're going. That's kind of the long road ahead of you. And that's, of course, when you read the trip reports, everyone says that's the longest slog. It's the longest 2 miles of your life. They weren't wrong. So we actually saw two other Highpointers come down, Austin and Alan. So that was kind of a fun reunion with others within the Highpointing community. I think for me, Matt was the first to reach the summit. I was, so we all reached the summit kind of on our own time. I reached it kind of shortly thereafter. It's for me, the summit is always a mixed feeling, because you can kind of celebrate, but you're really only halfway done.
Yeah.
So it's, we looked out, we had gorgeous views. It was very cold. I found myself putting on all of my layers, but and again, I think for me, I wasn't even sure my body would be able to last. I mean, I think we were on our feet for 10 hours at that point. It was that felt like a huge accomplishment. But again, like I said, the weather, just like the clouds kind of opened up for us. The views were incredible. The views going up to the summit were incredible. Again, I'll go back to this, but you kind of have to stop and just look at where you are every now and then. It feels magical.
It was such a feeling of accomplishment. Because we had, at least in my mind, I divided this up into different sections, and to complete those different sections, hiking in the dark up to trail camp, up to trail crest, along the backside, and then finally the summit, and to do it and be standing there with the Mount Whitney sign after seeing hundreds of pictures of people do the same thing, and now you're there in that moment, and you're in the top of the lower 48. It was a really, really cool feeling to have accomplished that, and to kind of savor that moment. And I tried hard not to think about like, oh, we're halfway done. Now we've got 11 and a half miles to go. But to kind of sit in that moment and enjoy that moment. It was made more difficult because, yes, it was beautiful and sunny, but it was about low 30s and 20-mile-an-hour winds. And so it was pretty cold at the top. And so Meredith and I had a bunch of snacks, and we were with probably, 10 other people huddled in the little rock hut there at the summit, just to try to get out of the wind, try to get some fuel in our bodies before we head down. And as we're sitting there, we can look out the door, and I see Tommy coming right up as well. So it was really cool to be up there as Tommy comes up, to be able to celebrate with him, go take pictures of Tommy at the top. And so it was neat to be able to experience that same feeling with the other members of the trip as we all got up to the top.
That was for me, yeah, that was a great moment. I forgot you guys were up there. I thought you were like, I knew you were out there, but I was like, I didn't know what it was going to look like. You know, that last, they kind of make you go left and down and go back up around, right? So you can't see the hut when you're approaching it. But I think, you know, Meredith mentioned seeing Austin and Allen, you know, so when you're walking that last 2.2 miles, you know, familiar face comes by, and Austin's like, "Hey, man, you got not much longer." And I'm like, mile and a half, you know, one of those things. And he's like, "I'm like, am I going to make it?" And I'm like, I needed someone to tell me. He's like, "You're going to make it." I'm like, "I'm going to make it, right?" He's like, "You're definitely going to make it. You're going to make it." And I'm like, "Okay." And that was just reaffirming to hear that. You know, I think I started crying like a mile left. You know, just thinking about, you know, what it was that we were doing. You know, and pretty awesome. I couldn't believe I was up there. I couldn't believe I was going to do it. You think about family, you think about all that stuff, and man, it was pretty emotional. I don't know why I'm emotional right now, but when we started this thing, I couldn't even imagine doing something like that. Couldn't even imagine it. Yeah. And to be there with Tom and you guys, it was just probably one of the best days of my life, really. And yeah, it's crazy. Sorry about that. I knew I was going to cry at some point. I didn't know it was going to be right now, but I tried to cry harder. I was like, all right, I'm crying. I want to really start crying. I was hiking, but I couldn't get. It was just natural. You know what I mean? I was just thinking about everything that led me to that day. You know, I think it's a Grateful Dead song. Everything has led to this day. You know, and it was pretty awesome. But then I kind of said, all right, where the hell is the hut? Like, it was the first time I was like, where am I? You know, I was lost a little bit, but. Sorry, you know exactly where you are. Just keep walking. Don't fall off the side. There are a couple, you know, you're walking on both sides there. When you're walking across the top, you got Sequoia on one side and you have the Sierra Nevadas on the other. And you got to pay attention to your footing. You know, I'm not saying you're going to fall over, but there was a refocus after I got emotional to say, all right, finish strong and get up there. And yeah, I don't know. It was just a wave of everything. You know, it was just right place, right time, right day, right people. And then Tom was coming up. What was the guy's name you were hiking with, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Meredith said, that we all had very unique and different experiences from the top of the switchbacks to the top of the mountain. Because, you know, Matt and Meredith were sort of off getting up there, moving well, and Tommy was sort of right there with them. I think at that point, that's when the altitude, I started feeling the altitude in terms of speed of climb. You know, so I would stop every few feet and take a breath. But what I also found was I met Jose, who, you got to love Jose. And I don't know if I told you guys, I have stayed in touch with Jose and we've gone back and forth. I don't know if you guys even remember Jose, because Jose was like a 25-year-old kid, right, who lived in California. And God bless him, just decided that, like, we're talking about our 6-month training plan. And he woke up that morning and said, I'm going to go climb Mount Whitney today. Got in the car, didn't think about altitude, didn't think about acclimatizing, didn't think about any of it. And he was sent from somewhere, because I honestly think if it wasn't for Jose, I might not have made it to the top, because I found myself, I switched into a different gear, which was like, I'm getting you up. Like, you're here, you got up here, because he was really feeling the effects of the altitude. And so he and I sort of went together, and we hit one point, and Matt's talking about how great the weather was. We hit one point where I remember distinctly, we're standing, we could see, remember you had to go to the left and then around up to the right. So you couldn't see the top, but you could see the path to the top. And we're looking out, and clouds looking like rain clouds were coming in. And if you guys remember at the top, the clouds, like, it would blow away and then it was beautiful blue sky. and then a cloud would come in, and then it would be gone. Well, there was this one kind of vulnerable point where Jose and I are looking, and it looks like rain clouds. And now it's getting late, and we're like, all right, are we being stupid here? Like, it was the first time that there ever was like, is this a smart thing for us to be doing? Right? With the weather coming in, it's getting late. We have to come down. As Meredith said, you're only halfway there. Right? But we sort of powered on. And I do remember as I was coming up, seeing Matt and Meredith coming down. And that was just the most awesome feeling because I felt like I wasn't that far behind, that at least they were still right there, right? And then Tommy was awesome. Tommy hung. We took a bunch of pictures. We went in the little hut. So, yeah, it was amazing. I understand Tommy getting emotional because it was a very emotional kind of thing. Like, we had spent so much time building to this moment, and now here you are, right? And you sort of have done it, and, the surrounding views and everything were worthy of it because they were amazing.
Yeah, I think being on the summit is just beautiful and it's awe-inspiring, and it should give anyone a reason to be emotional. But Tommy, when you were describing that, it made me think of our first recording of this podcast in 2021 when I was just learning about how you guys got started highpointing, and you were both talking about all these plans you had and the summit that you had at a New Hampshire cabin where you had a map and you're, putting push pins everywhere and this is what I want to do. And now to hear you say that you stood on top of Whitney, I'm like, wow, everyone's come so far. It's so cool to hear just over the past, however long I've been doing this podcast. It's been a lot of fun to watch everyone, but you guys have been on the show like so many times. It's really cool to hear that. And everyone has different experiences on the summit. And I summited on July 3rd, I think 2022. And I'll say there were people on they were trail running, and they just got to the summit. They're in their running clothes and they just stopped and they're like, all right, that was average. And then there were people on their cell phones because they got service up there and they're like, hey, guess where I am? And I'm like, hang on, am I on Mount Whitney or am I on like some super popular hike, like a Camelback Mountain in Phoenix or something where you would see a lot of people? Yeah. But I think it's just the difference of going, in July as opposed to September when, conditions are a little colder and you get people who bring more stuff and are maybe in a different mindset.
For me, like when Tom came up, I was so happy. I knew you were going to make it once we got up to the after the switchbacks, and I just I never didn't think you were going to make it. I was so happy that you did. It was crazy. Like we're all happy for each other, and I think that's the type of people the Foxhole 4 are. We're happy for other people's successes leading up to it. Everyone was, the high pointers in general. Everyone was pumped for us. Like, oh my God, you got a permit, you're going to go, and everyone's so supportive. But I live in the suburbs, kind of live where I grew up, and sometimes the support isn't always there. There's little critical thinking, and everyone's busting each other a little bit. But when I saw Tom coming up, I said, that son of a bitch. He's 60. I don't even know how old you are. You're older than me. And, a lot of respect. You are older, and it does take a little longer. So I think you're very fast for your age and for what you've accomplished. And I knew you were going to make it. And thank God for Jose, but I think it takes a village. And, those are the types of things. I was just so happy when you got up there. I was waiting for you. And, and
look, when you think about like we all overcame stuff, right?
Right.
Meredith with her back.
Matt rallying through that began. So, that I think makes it wasn't just like, day in the park, we went up, we came down. I think that things are a lot more meaningful when, you have to overcome adversity in order to make it happen. And you learn a lot about yourself.
Right.
I appreciate you all saying you knew I'd make it. I wasn't quite so sure I was going to make it a bunch of times, but, you plow through and then it means a lot. And Jose, and the reason I have stayed in touch with Jose on the way down was a huge, I like to think that as much as I kind of helped and supported him on the way up, he did the same with me on the way down, which was great. So, he and I have kind of stayed in contact afterwards.
And it's
a good kid.
Yeah, he was like an angel. We had a couple angels that trip. You know, we had a picture. We have a great picture of an angel up in the sky. Tom's mom had recently passed away. Started to bring that up, but you know, we took a picture overlooking Rock Creek, and we looked at it that night, and there was literally an angel in the sky. And then we said, "Well, we know who we're hiking this for." So we had that in the back of our mind that we did have somebody watching over us. We had someone there to help us out, and then it came in the human form a couple times with some other people on the trail. And Lauren,
there's that whole concept of trail angels, right?
Yeah,
I think.
The devil's always out there too. We ran into the devil a few times.
There's one, and I want to toss this out there to the universe. Is so on the way down, Jose and Jasmine was another, and I honestly I have not been able to locate. So on the way down, Jasmine was phenomenal, and we saw her on the switchbacks. So Jose and I were now coming down. We saw Jasmine on the switchbacks. She was hiking by herself, and it was starting to get darker. And she was like, "Hey, can we all hike together?" Like, of course, let's hike together. So Jasmine, Jose, and I are all coming down together. And she was amazing. We got to the bottom, and we can get to this when you want to, Lauren, but I couldn't find her. Like, she literally, I sent a note to the Mount Whitney, website group, and was like, if anybody knows of Jasmine, like, I would love to be able to reconnect with her, to thank her. But she just disappeared off into nowhere. And Jose didn't know anything more than her first name. So she may have been
Jasmine,
a little
if you're out there.
I don't know. Jasmine came, was awesome, and then is gone.
Yeah. Well,
was she real? Was Jasmine real? Was that a hallucination?
He was not a hallucination. Hallucinations were hallucinations, I hope.
Let's talk about the descent. So, Tom, you said you saw some dark clouds. Did they turn into rain?
They turned into nothing. No, thankfully, we, I'm not even going to say in a smart way, decided to plow onward. And by the time we got to the top, the clouds were gone and it was blue sky and beautiful.
That's good.
Yeah, they just blew right through.
So, Meredith, how's your back feeling so far, the summit and then the descent?
My back, kind of thing that was I was having problems with, because my back miraculously did great. No one really talks about the descent of mountains and how to get down. We all talk about the challenge of getting up and switchbacks. But I think for me, the descent was really, really challenging. And I think this is probably one of the most mentally challenging day hikes, just because, again, you get up, there's this sense of accomplishment, euphoria, you're so happy. And then you have to get down, and it's 11 miles. And it just feels like it doesn't end. And you're going, you think you can see kind of the trailhead where you started, and you just keep walking. So for me, I think that was the most challenging part of our day. I definitely started to kind of lose some steam, probably wasn't fueling myself enough, started to bonk a little bit. It was challenging, and I was so happy to get back down for the portal store in order to get the burger that everyone talks about. But thankfully, I think Matt was going a little faster than me. He ordered me a burger that was there.
Oh, that's perfect.
When I got down. That is a true friend.
Yeah. No, you're right about the descent being more difficult, especially on your knees. I mean, hiking poles help, but it's just the nature of descending. You're gonna slam your knees. Tom, I heard about a hallucination. Can you walk us through that as best as you can? I understand it's a little foggy.
So the perspective on, just at this point, the time gap got way, 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 way wider between Matt and Meredith. Like, Matt and Meredith were focused on the burger when they shut down that night. I was focused on the pancakes the next morning when they opened back up again.
Okay.
So I had a whole I got the full experience of the day hike and then a little bit more. So we were coming down, and it was Jose and Jasmine and I, and they were great. And it was dark, and we were all exhausted and tired, and the altitude. And I literally started, and I did some research afterwards. Like, does this happen? And I guess it does. But I started seeing. First thing I saw is all the white rocks. I would walk and I would look up ahead, and on the left, I would see like a family of people sitting on the trail. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. And nothing weird, nothing scary, not just like, oh, there's a family up there. Like, that's weird. And then I would get up, and it was just a bunch of white rocks that looked like a family that were sitting there.
Wow.
And it was bizarre. There were just like, but the weirdest one, and I do want to toss this out there because I know, Lauren, you're a bit of a Highpointer historian, and I know in all of your podcast discussions, I do want to throw this out there to the Highpointer world, because I hit a point where I was almost finished, but I wasn't going down the traditional trail. So I was off the main trail, but I knew I was close to the bottom. And I had lost Jasmine at this point, and I had lost Jose at this point. So it's just me, middle of the night, exhausted, altitude, all of that stuff. But I know I'm there. It's just like, I just got to get there. It's very close. And I look up and I see what I swear to God looked like a roller coaster. This massive like roller coaster. And I'm looking and I'm trying to figure it out. And long story short, I find my way down ultimately to like a overflow parking lot. So not the main area that we started. It was sort of like a side parking lot. And I'm like, all right, this was bizarre. I went into AI afterwards and I'm like, I swear to God, I saw a roller coaster, like a gigantic roller coaster. And it came back and it's like, what you likely saw was there used to be like some old trail structure that they used to bring things down Mount Whitney. It's like, but it was years and years and years ago. And they said that there still remain some of the remnants of that in terms of physical structures.
Yeah.
So I likely saw something and somehow in my head at that point thought of it as a roller coaster. So it was bizarre. It was a bizarre finish to the whole thing.
Now that you say that, I think I remember our guide telling us that. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it because I didn't pay a lot of attention. But I'm going to have to ask the experts.
Yeah, people will know. I think people will know. But it's just cool. Bizarre how like your mind sort of, works.
Yeah, well, also you guys you're lacking a lot of sleep at this point because you started at midnight.
It's like
probably didn't get 8 hours.
Food deprivation. I hadn't eaten. Like there were a lot of factors that would make that very feasible.
Plus the mushroom chocolates in the trail mix probably helped.
Exactly. That was all that I could take in at that point.
That's the bucket list. We'll talk about that. That's a bucket list item. But anyway, but I think for me coming down, I'm usually pretty good at the top is halfway, right? The top is, but this one was a little bit different. This was totally different. I wasn't thinking about down that much, but I did feel pretty good. I waited for Tom at the top, not for that long, Tom. I wasn't up there much, maybe a half hour, an hour at the most. I don't even think it was that long, but you got up there pretty quick, but I kind of wanted to go, right? I did sit in the hut for a while. I'd already fueled up. I already had my water. I was ready to kind of get moving. We took some great pictures, and I think because we talked about it before that we were likely going to split up at some point on the way back down. Because
and Jose and I were together, so it was sort of like go.
It was really good that none of those conversations had to happen on the mountain.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
We talked about it. There was no personal feelings. I said I'm gonna go after we went down the rocky part at the hut. And I said I just want to go 2 miles. I want to see how fast. I just want to test myself. I do always hike with somebody else. I'm really not alone much. I felt good. I said, how fast can I make it to the top of the switchbacks here? And I was motoring. And then I got to the switchbacks and I kind of turned around and Tom wasn't that close. I said, I'm going to go down. I'm just going to go down here. So I did those on my own, and I think I was going fast in my own mind. I was very happy with my pace, and but I wanted to get back down to sit for a while. So when I got down to it's a trail camp? Yeah, trail camp, right? Down at the bottom there where we took the pictures. Yeah. So I sat there for a few hours. We met a couple high pointers there, familiar faces who were camping out, going up the next day. Right, they were tenting out. Tim Webb, Robin, and it was just good to see people that you knew. It was crazy. I'm like, I know these people. I'm here. I'm out with you at Trail Crest. So I was waiting for Tom to come down. And then he came down. We reconnected. We did our water thing. And then the last 6 miles, I went on my own from there. And it was pretty wild. It was dark. It got dark pretty quick. I think this is around 6 o'clock, Tom, right? 5:30, 6 o'clock. Yeah. So when we left trail camp, it was dark the rest of the way. Right. So my first 6 hours and my last 6 hours were in the dark. And I think that was the same for Tom as well. Matt and Meredith get down, I think, in the daylight, right? Or just about, or maybe just losing it. Yep. I think the hallucinating Tom is like, it's real. I heard a waterfall that I didn't hear before on the way up. I very distinctly hear that waterfall right now. I'm like, where is that? And I think I saw red lights shining on water. And I don't even know if there was water down in front of me, but I definitely saw red lights, and I don't know where they were coming from, but they kind of guided me along the way. And I just thought that there was a lot of switchbacks at the end that I don't remember walking up. Where you say we stopped and we looked at the stars on the rocks. I remember those switchbacks on the way down. Like, are these the 99 switchbacks? What is happening here? But there was a lot of them, and I couldn't see where I was going. And it was, I never was nervous, but my right ankle I have an issue with, and I started feeling pain in my left knee. And it was like, oh no, I got a couple hours left. My left knee's going. I did see a lot of eyes. Like I thought, Tom says he saw people. I saw eyes, like perfect eyes. I don't know if it was a wolf. I'm like, what is that right there? What is this? This is my spirit animal.
Maybe he did see there.
I see the eyes, like right, perfect spacing. I'm like, what is that? I think it was a German Shepherd, actually. I think a German Shepherd helped me on the way down the mountain. Someone guided me. But I remember thinking, like, is that a friendly dog? Is that a friendly wolf? And then, I don't know. It was just a strange thing. But I think finally getting to the bottom, it kind of stuck up. I finished without even knowing I was going to finish because it was so dark. And it was pretty emotional. It's like, wow, I did it. You kind of check yourself and you're like, okay. I was just walked alone. And sometimes on the journey of life, you got to walk alone sometimes. And I knew Tom was coming in behind me. And I knew Matt and Meredith had already gone because their car was left. Car was gone. So it was just like, I don't know. It was not quite the sense of accomplishment as getting to the top. But yet, you were alive, you were done, and you had just done it. There was no celebrating when you finished. It was exhausting, but it was it was just, again, once in a lifetime. We did it. I think we might have been a little more than a day on the trail, but who's counting? We were legal.
Well, then we get up and we have to drive to Vegas immediately, right? Because we check out, we drive to Vegas.
Oh, to Vegas. Oh, you have to
home.
You flew out of Vegas. Okay.
And Meredith was in Vegas. So we then had kind of our epic wrap-up dinner, which was phenomenal. We missed Matt. Matt headed out in a different direction to head back home. But that was awesome, too. That was like a great memory that I have.
Yeah.
And Tommy, you tell sort of our final coup de grace as we were leaving Vegas.
Well, when you're in Vegas, you have to gamble a little bit. We got, I got a little bit of a gambler's heart in me. But so the next morning we were flying out, and we said, all right, we got to play. We had to play roulette, right? We had to play roulette, and we had to play certain numbers.
Right? We had all our 14,505 and all the
Whitney's 14,505. It was our 26 high point, right? So we played 1, 4, 5, 14, and 26, right? So on one, we each put in $60, and then we hit the second one. So Meredith, the Caesar's Palace paid for your dinner the night before. Not Tom and I.
Yeah. So, and it was so funny because we were like pretty confident we're going to win this.
Yeah.
Not that the odds showcased that at all, but we were just like, no, we just did all this and the universe is on our side. And so we're going to win this. The first one, we were a little Like, I don't know what happened. Our number didn't come up, but then on the second one, it hit.
Yeah, 1, 4, 5, 26. No, 1, 4, 5, 14, 26. And we didn't win the first one. And I'm like, we're going to win the second one. And when we hit it, we won like $400, $500 on it.
And then they escorted us. They escorted us out of the building.
Then they walked us out. But it's funny. It's like winning the second one is way better than winning the first one. Like, we won the first one and lost the second one. It wouldn't have been as good. So we lost the first one. We're like, wait a minute. I didn't even think we could even potentially. I thought we were going to win both, right? But winning the second one, much better.
But it was the perfect cherry on the top of just
What's the next high point for everybody? Meredith, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this is, I think, the first time that I can remember in my high pointing journey that I don't have a high point planned yet. I have 9 left, so I'm getting the kind of highly technical, need to have a plan, probably some partners. But yeah, I really hope I can finish those last 9.
No, I'm sure you will. If you climbed Whitney just after injuring your back, I think you'll be good. Matt, how about you?
I don't have any hard dates on the books, but thinking of next summer, I want to tick off one of the hard ones in the West. So thinking, do we do Idaho or maybe Utah? One of those. And then the convention next year, I'm planning a trip around West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, et cetera, to tick some of those off my list.
Very good. Tommy, what's next?
I think we've been targeting Maine, right? Katahdin. We've left on the East Coast on purpose. It's our last East Coast mountain. So we were thinking of Maine as a special mountain for us to do. And then I think probably, Kentucky. My son's graduating from the University of Kentucky next spring or summer,
Okay.
He's walking in the spring. Let's just put it that way. So if Tom and I can get out there to a basketball game or something like that, we're going to do that one together, obviously. And I'd like to do it with my son. So Kentucky's there and Ohio is there at the same time. So I'm thinking for me, it's Maine, Ohio, Kentucky, and Illinois potentially is on the list. We were thinking of doing that this year. So I think probably right around there, Tom. What do you think?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think those sound like good ones.
Yep.
I do have a linking back to Matt's bucket list. I have a bucket list trip coming up, which is not going to be a high point, although actually I'm not actually sure if it's a high point or not. But my daughter and I are going to Japan, and we're going to climb Mount Fuji.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, that is a high point.
And I've heard amazing things about it, where there's like a wooden walking stick, whereas you hit each of the stations on the way up, they burn into it, kind of what that station entails. So it seems like there's a lot of spirituality around it. And so I'm sort of diving into doing some of the research around that.
Oh, that is so cool.
That should be a big one.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
There have been a
What's
couple
the elevation on that, Tom?
That have done Mount Fuji.
What is the elevation? Question. I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, everything's downhill from here. We did Whitney.
I'm not sure.
Everything else is easy.
And now for my final question, my favorite question. Does anyone have an outdoor-related book, documentary, or podcast that you would recommend to listeners? Tom, it's okay if you don't have one because we just discussed ours like a couple days ago.
Thank you for that. It's 12,300 feet, Tommy. So you're right. It's all down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Meredith, we'll start with you. Any book, documentary, or podcast that you'd recommend to listeners?
Yeah, since I got into this sport, this hobby, I think I've consumed lots of different podcasts, movies, books, and thanks to a lot of your podcast guests, I've gotten some really great ideas from this very podcast. But I think something I did recently, there's a movie festival called Mountains on Stage. They come through multiple cities. They're in New York and I think other cities as well. And it's just different kind of outdoor and mountain documentaries kind of in one evening. So that with a friend, and we've done that before. And it's just kind of a really nice way to see some amazing things that people are doing on, out in the mountains. So recommend check that out if it's in your city.
That's cool. It's called Mountains on Stage.
Yes.
That's awesome. I like that because, what we do, mountain climbing or high pointing or whatever, it's not a spectator sport. So we do rely on these ways of capturing those journeys. So that's cool. I'm going to check that out. I've never heard of that. Matt, how about you?
I don't have any new ones. I will say that I did borrow some guidance from this podcast, and so when Catherine was talking about Denali damsels and and some of the inspiration there, I did order after listening to that 30 Below, and thought that was a great book, and so I would recommend that to folks learning about kind of the history of females and mountaineering, and just kind of the challenges, and then how it came together as this all women's team was really, really cool to read, and then to read about their experience. So I loved that book that I would recommend.
You're right. And Catherine is a really great resource, and she's an expert in really bringing females to her sport at cycling and to climbing too. And I think she just got off of Denali with a women's team. I got to talk to her about that. She is just such a wonderful resource for all things high pointing and just outdoors, and great writer too. Tommy, do you have any recommendations?
I have two things that I thought about. One, I sent this to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Traveler, that's right. Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's called Slow Traveler, An Intentional Path in Mindful Adventures. So I think I had a 6-hour delay coming out of Vegas at the airport. So I spent a lot of time in the bookstore, and I saw this. And it's really about spending a lot of time in one place and being familiar with the place. And I thought that was the longest we've stayed in one spot for a high point, Tom, was like almost a full week. Yeah. And you really got to understand the area and the terrain and those types of things. So I thought slow, intentional travel, good for my brain. It's a really good book, and I thought it's written from a good perspective about how it's just a different way to travel, right? And my other one, I like Nick Offerman, of all people, is on an Outside podcast, Outside Magazine. Mm-hmm. So the Nick Offerman podcast on Outside is unbelievable. He's an outdoorsman. He loves hiking. Him and his wife go. And I just didn't know I was a Nick Offerman fan, but I am now. He was really good on that podcast. So I think the Nick Offerman Outside podcast, maybe a couple months ago. Again, I think I listened to it on the plane on the way back. It was pretty pleasant, and it was a really, really good podcast. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoy Outside podcasts. They have a new episode every Wednesday. It's, what I love about that podcast is that they always start off with what he calls burnt toast. And that's when the guest talks about their something that they did in the outdoors where they failed, like huge. Yep. Something went super wrong, but not like tragic or anything like that. And it's just a fun, lighthearted way to start a show. Yeah. I have a recommendation of a podcast that I've been listening to, and it's called Florida Uncut. And the host of this podcast used to be the host of this podcast that I like called Adventure Sports Podcast. His name is Mason Gravely. And I, since living in North Carolina, have been so interested in Florida wildlife because we go there on vacation. And I'm really, really fascinated in all things Florida conservation, from like the panther, which I recommended Path of the Panther, the documentary on this podcast before. Okay. So Florida Uncut, Mason brings all of these Florida conservation experts on his show to talk about what they're doing, everything from the Florida Trail to the Panther Corridor and everything. And it's just like you develop this true appreciation for all things Florida wildlife. Because when we think about Florida, we think like big old swamp or Florida man, and all of those things are true. But it's also a fascinating, fascinating place that I've had the pleasure of visiting a few times since living out here. And when we move out west this summer, I'm going to miss it. But that's called Florida Uncut. So I want to thank what was it called? The Foxhole 4? Foxtrot 4 or Foxhole?
Foxhole 4.
Foxtrot 4. Foxtrot.
Can we talk really quickly? Can we talk about me? We were at dinner. Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were at our Vegas kind of celebratory dinner, and we were talking about how, in the Foxhole, you want to be with people who you can trust and who you're, that are just going to have your back. And so that's kind of how that meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that. Yeah. I heard Foxhole and I'm like, oh, we're all sharing misery or something.
Yeah, we got to get out of the Foxhole. The only way out is to be with some ride or die, right? So
that's right.
These three other people here, I mean, I'll do anything for you guys.
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do is we have to plan our next High Point trip together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's West Virginia, maybe it's something else, but
yeah,
for sure. But Lauren, I got one other recommendation for me is your podcast. To everybody, whoever, I mean, there's so many episodes now. I think there's over 50.
I think over 70.
Is it 70 now?
There.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but I did go back and listen to that first one in preparation for this. I was like, what if I don't want to repeat what I say and those types of things? But I'm like, I thought of you on the way up a couple of times when I was getting emotional. I think what you've done for the community is amazing. We're at the convention and everybody was asking, "Where's Lauren? How's Lauren?" I volunteered at the desk with Patty, who I had heard on the podcast. So instantly, Patty and I had a connection, and everybody who's been on your podcast, we're a little fraternity. And Meredith and Matt are part of the fraternity now. But Lauren, I think what you're doing here and continue to do has been really important to Tom and I, and it really does. I know people before I see them and meet them, and it's pretty special. So I want to thank you again for taking the time and just the effort. And I know it doesn't, fit in always and come easy, and we all have things going on, but everyone's really happy with the results of the podcast, and so happy to share that they were on, and you're always a topic of conversation. And
thank you.
Everyone really likes you.
It's a lot of fun to do. I don't do it as often as I used to with, when this was a project.
Yep.
I just do it when I can, and it's something that I always look forward to. And I feel like I have this family that I've never met, although we did meet in Chapel Hill, Tom and Tommy and I.
Yep.
Yes.
And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, this is a super cool thing to do. And now I can say that I have 2 new guests on.
Yeah.
So thank you to the Foxhole 4 for making time to do this show. And I hope that you achieve whatever's next on your bucket list. And I hope that we all meet each other in person, maybe at the next convention.
Yeah, look forward to that. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, guys.